We're going to talk a lot. We've got a wide variety of guests this afternoon, starting first with Stas Margaronis. He is the American Journal of Transportation Ports and Transportation reporter, works out of Oakland, California. Going to talk about the latest news from the ports because this is what Stas specializes in, and talk about what has been going on, not just at the Port of Baltimore, not far from where I live, but also at the other ports across the country. Stas, good to have you with us. Thanks for joining us again.
Thank you, Dan.
Stas, it looks as though, from everything we were able to see and the numbers that came across the transom, that last month was a pretty good month for the ports. They had they ended the quarter on a pretty good number, didn't they?
They did. The complete data that I have comes from the West Coast Trade Report, which is produced by the Pacific Merchant Shipping Association. And everybody, not everybody, but many ports did very, very well. And just to quote a couple, this is data for February, which is generally a slow month, Dan, but not in this case. Los Angeles was up 34.9% from the February of 2023. Long Beach was up 20.7%. New York, New Jersey was up 6.8%. Georgia ports were up 7.7%. Houston, 11.9%. Virginia, 2.4%. The Northwest Seaport Alliance did not do as well. They were down slightly, 0.2%. And South Carolina was down 1.4%. Oakland was up 9.1%. Jacksonville up 11.1%. Maryland up 0.9%. And Miami up 2.8%. Then Philadelphia was up 6.3%. New Orleans up 16.8%. And Boston up 18.3%. So generally speaking, we had a good month of February.
What's causing this? Because there's got to be a reason.
Well, I think in the case of the West Coast ports, they are benefiting from the situation that you and I talked about, which is the two canal problem. Mm-hmm. On the Suez Canal side, we've got the Houthi attack on shipping approaching the Suez Canal, and that's been discouraging a lot of traffic. And what's happening is that those ships that used to go through the Suez Canal through Europe and then to the East Coast ports are having to take a longer run to go around the African coast to get to Europe and then to us on the East Coast. So that's a problem from that standpoint. And then there's a problem on the Panama Canal, which is that long-term drought had resulted in low water levels. And up until recently, that was really causing a traffic jam. Now, there's been more rain this year, and the season has started on a pretty optimistic note. And there's hope that the crisis with the canal will be back to normal, will be gone, and things will be back to normal in 2025. But in the meantime, shipping coming from the Asian end of the world to our U.S. coast ports going through the canal, they're impacted by this as well. So both of those things are going on. This helps the ports on the West Coast because it's easier at this point to go to the West Coast and drop your boxes and take the rail inland. And so LA and Long Beach are showing particularly good numbers, and they've benefited from this situation. And Dan, there is the added uncertainty about the ILA contract with East Coast and Gulf. Right. So the ILWU issue had caused a problem for 18 months on the West Coast. They're now signed up and ratified. So things are starting to move in a bit of a different direction.
So the same thing that happened a year ago then on the West Coast with the uncertainty is now the possibility on the East Coast. And that uncertainty always creates a vacuum. And in this case, the folks on the West Coast are getting a chance to exploit that uncertainty a little bit.
They sure are. Now, one of the flies in the ointment is in the same PMSA report. There's a commentary from Jock O'Connell, who is the economist who advises PMSA, and it is about the movement of Chinese containers through Mexico. And one of the conclusions, well, the data that Jock shows is that there's been a move for the last 10, 12 years of some Chinese containers going through Mexico and then coming to the U.S. There was some reason to see that happening with the canal situation and some of the other situations. But according to Jock's report, Chinese shipments to Mexico's two top Pacific Coast ports have been steadily increasing and have been exceptionally brisk in recent years. Volumes rose more than sixfold to 137,000 metric tons in 2023, up from 21,000 metric tons 10 years ago. And if you look at the chart that he has in his report, you see that 2017, which was the year the Trump administration imposed tariffs on Chinese goods, turns out to be a tipping point. Things were sort of moving at a gradual level, and then they started to jump. And post-2017, you're starting to see a lot more containers, and that's especially true in the last 3 years. So that's, if you're going to impose tariffs, you can't have that stuff coming from another direction. And one of the things that Jock points out is that U.S. Customs there is no question that Chinese manufacturers have been setting up shop in lands that are less likely to attract the attention of U.S. Customs inspectors or congressional critics of free trade. Nor is there any question that Chinese investments in Mexico's industrial parks have been burgeoning.
What countries in particular are we talking about, Stas, that are doing that? Because I know there's been a lot of criticism of China purchasing land in the United States, for instance, but what countries are we talking about?
Well, I think the principal issue, Dan, is that we're seeing the Chinese do an end run around the tariffs. And they're doing an end run. And they're using Mexico to come in through the back door because the North American Free Trade Agreement allows us free trade between the United States and Mexico. If it's genuine investment in Mexico, we can see that. But if this is an end run around tariffs that have been imposed by the United States, I think it's something we should be paying more attention to.
Stas, it's 2:13 on a Tuesday afternoon. It's good to have you along with us. Stas will be with us for the half hour. At the bottom of the hour, Holly Harana is going to join us. She's a defense attorney with the California-based law firm Tyson Mendez in San Diego. We're going to discuss the issue of nuclear verdicts with Holly and talk with her as well between 2:30 to 3 p.m. But Stas will be with us until the half hour, 2:30 Eastern Time. This is the Tuesday edition of Road Dog Trucking News. Dan Rona filling in for Mark with us. The phone lines are open if you'd like to get into the conversation. If you are a trades driver or you have any connection to the ports and you would like to discuss what's taking place, Stas is the man. He's been with AJOT for many years, and he is an expert when it comes to the coverage of the ports. We will continue our conversation with Stas here on Road Dog Trucking News, Sirius XM 146.
Trucking News with Dan Ronan, sitting in for Mark Willis. Call in now and be part of the conversation. 888-8-ROAD-DOG.
It's 2:18 Eastern Time. Let's take a quick look at weather across the country. We do have a lot of problems in the plains parts of the country, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas, because of tornadic activity. And they have seen 120 tornadoes in 4 days in parts of Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, and the like. Keep an ear out to Sirius XM channel 146, where we always have weather information and the updated news about what is taking place in your area. Today, across most of the country, it is a pretty nice day here in the nation's capital, 86 degrees and sunny in Washington, D.C. We're looking at 52 in Boston, 68 in New York, 86, as I said, in D.C. Down in Charlotte, 80, 76 in Atlanta with rain, Jacksonville, 84, Tampa, 84, Miami, 82. Right across the whole central part of the country, it's pretty nice. 88 in New Orleans, 83 in Memphis, 82 in St. Louis, 73 in Chicago, Minneapolis, St. Paul, overcast 68. As you get into the central part of the country and into the southwestern United States, obviously, it's going to get warmer. We're looking at 84 in Houston, 82 in Dallas, Lubbock, 93 degrees today, Oklahoma City, 87, Kansas City, 83, Denver, 73, Albuquerque, 81, El Paso, 91, Phoenix, 95, Las Vegas, 91, and then Salt Lake City, 63, 54 in Boise, and Medford, Oregon is at 67. The Bay Area is 65 degrees, Reno 67, Los Angeles 75 degrees. Quick look at weather across the country. Like I said, stay tuned to Sirius XM channel 146. In the event there's bad weather in your area, we will certainly let you know. Back to our guest, Stas Margaronis is with us. He is with the American Journal of Transportation. He is an expert when it comes to ports and understands what is taking place at those crucial facilities. Stas, more than a month ago, we had an enormously huge story still taking place in Baltimore with the Port of Baltimore, with the Key Bridge. They have been really aggressively moving debris out of the channel, trying to get the port partially reopened. What's the reporting say in terms of how they're doing? There's a deadline to try to get the full channel open within a month. Do you think they've got a chance of being successful?
I think they do. I think that they've done very well. You're starting to see ships coming in and out. It's really impressive, and a lot of credit goes to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the management that they put into that effort.
This is, I've driven across that bridge so many times, and to see this bridge go down in a period of about 45 seconds. I mean, like I said, I had been on that bridge about a week before it collapsed, but to see it go down in 45 seconds when that thing got hit, you really do get a feel of how much power was behind that container ship, the Dolly, even though it was traveling at a low speed.
Yeah, and Dan, there's been, you and I were talking about this earlier, there's been a lot of debate, and there's going to be a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking until we see the NTSB report on what was the cause and what are the implications. One of the issues that has been showing up, and it was in the article in the Baltimore Sun that both of us read, is the issue of tug assist and whether there should have been a tugboat escort. And there's two views on that. I've talked to two bar pilots. One of them said it would help. The other one said it would hurt. I talked to a tugboat captain this morning, and he said to me that when you've got a ship that big going at 8.9 knots, your tugboat, that's just about your tugboat's service speed. So it's very difficult to stop a ship when it's going that fast. And I was just looking at some of the specs on the ship. That ship has a 55,000 horsepower engine. So even if it was going at reduced speed, that's a lot more horsepower than a 5,000 horsepower tug. So I think there's going to be a lot of analysis and a lot of, obviously there need to be more precautions, and obviously having a tug assist, if that works, would be good. It's tough sledding here. There's a lot of variables, and none of us is really qualified to come up with the answer until we see that report.
Do we know if they've gotten those workers who were on the ship off the ship? Because I know for a while they were on the ship 2-3 weeks. I mean, do we know if those men, the 21, 22 of them, were off the ship finally?
I don't know the answer to that, but Dan, I don't understand why they weren't relieved shortly afterwards. I know that there would have to be some investigation and some interrogation, but I would think that those guys need a break. They're obviously going to be the focus of a lot of attention, and not all of it good. So there may be some reasons that you and I don't understand for what's happening there, but hopefully they will be relieved, and somebody else will be there to take responsibility. But if the end of the month is coming up faster than we're 30 days away, and they're moving very, very quickly to get that ship channel up and running.
And Baltimore, while it's not a large port for containers, it is a very important part for automobiles, for trucks, for farm equipment, heavy equipment, caterpillars, backhoes, all sorts of stuff like that. That really is one of the most important ports in the country for that type of cargo, isn't it?
Yeah, and they've had to divert, and that was a big challenge when that happened. I talked to one of the car carriers, and they were struggling at that point to divert their ships. Now, we're not hearing much right now about that, so I assume that things are settling down, but everything is still run in the shipping business on a pretty tight schedule. And once that schedule starts to get interfered with, it's like a domino effect. Things that should be there aren't there. There are delays. And let's not forget that all the time that the ship channel is shut, there are orders that are coming in that should have been filled, that are not being filled, that are going to have to be filled once the port is up and running. So there's going to be a sizable period where Baltimore is going to have to be juggling a lot of balls in the air, and that is going to create a lot of delays for the next couple of months, I would imagine.
And I should point out to our listeners that next hour, 3 o'clock to 3:30, we're going to be joined by Nick Iannelli. He is a reporter with the Washington, D.C. powerhouse WTOP-FM. Nick has been one of the principal reporters covering the Port of Baltimore, and we're going to have a 25-minute Q&A session with Nick as well to talk about some of the things he's seen up there as well. Stas, one of the things that I have been impressed with out of this is that, like COVID, the supply chain has figured out a way to make it work. It's been a little difficult, it's been a little challenging, but lo and behold, they moved stuff to New York, New Jersey, they moved stuff to Virginia, they moved stuff to Savannah, they diverted, they got the smaller channel open. They have figured it out in a pretty quick period of time. It speaks to the resiliency of those that work in the supply chain, doesn't it?
It sure does. And this happened really on a dime. There was no warning. And I think there were a lot of concerns up front that this was going to be an issue, but the diversions to the other ports have worked. The only issue that you've got out there, Dan, that is that things are taking longer and they're going to cost more, and those can have repercussions down the line. But hopefully, as soon as the port is up and running, this issue will get resolved, and you'll start to see the flow reestablished. I think one of the longer-term issues that you and I talked about a month ago is what is going to happen with the Francis Scott Key Bridge being out of commission for the foreseeable future. And one of the issues that I raised with you when we talked the last time is that the supply chain is on land, and there needs to be some consideration to start moving some container moves by water so that we have an additional mode of transport, not just for emergency situations, but also to relieve the congestion that we've got on the I-95 corridor. I mean, you take a bridge out for the next 5-10 years, you're creating a lot of stress on that artery going up and down the East Coast.
Yeah, a lot of it does go up and down the I-95 corridor, which is not far from where I live, and you see a lot of trucks running up and down that corridor because of that, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And you already saw a lot of them before, but now you don't have the Beltway in operation, and that's going to be impacting a whole lot of people, maybe not hugely, but it's putting more pressure on the system. And I think that we need to be looking at this in a little bit more holistic way of how we can make sure that we can relieve some of those choke points and make sure that there are additional avenues to move up and down the coast, because this is probably not going to be the last time this happened. And, you know, there are weather issues and other issues that can come down the pipe.
Stas, great to talk to you. We're coming up to 2:30 Eastern time, so we must say goodbye, but it is always good to talk with you, and you bring a lot to the table. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Dan.
We'll do it again. Stas Margaronis, he's with the American Journal of Transportation, covers ports and transportation. We appreciate Stas joining us from the great city of Oakland, California.